Hey, what's up, MythGuardians? Cool Cat here, and today we are just a few days past the purple changes, the purple buffs, if you will. So I decided it would be a great idea to, instead of just covering one deck here, I'm going to go ahead and cover 5 different purple decks for you to try. They're all different kinds of styles, so you'll most likely find something that you'll like. So this is going to be a great 5 purple decks for you to try past the purple changes. Alright, so first up we have possibly one of the best options post-change. It's going to be yellow-purple control. I know yellow-purple control has been a little bit of a thing under the radar since, the game's inception, since purple was brought in as a color. It was never really the best option as far as control decks go. It was always, outdone by yellow-green, by yellow-orange, things like that. But with these purple changes bringing the top end of purple, those mythics, to just a whole nother level, then this deck really does, I think, climb into the tier 1 status. The biggest change that I think is going to boost this deck is the Defy Death change. It no longer costs mana to cast, so you don't have to leave mana open. You just have to leave 2 purple gems open, which is a lot easier than 2 purple gems and also 2 mana. And with this change, it's also a lot less telegraphed that you'll have it in your hand. So for example, if you are going to be banking on that Defy Death, you leave 2 mana, 2 purple gems open, your opponent's most likely going to know that you have that Defy Death in hand, and they'll plan accordingly. One of the biggest things with Defy Death is that as soon as it's procced, their turn ends, your turn starts. So if they proc Defy Death and they haven't played any cards yet, then they just completely skip their turn. I've won a couple of games off of that, so until people get wise to that interaction, it's definitely a good plan to run Defy Death in a lot of different purple lists. But along with that, the God of Gamers change is going to be extremely helpful as well. Lowering that down to 4 mana is going to help you cruise through the mid game and into your late game cards, as well as the Jinsuk Dollmaster buff. It's just so much easier to get that brand down when you get the Jinsuk down 1 turn earlier. And then you also have the Baku Boogeyman buff. Bringing that down to 6 mana brings it into extremely playable territory. It can shut down a lot of the bigger threats like Sapo. Playing this down at 6 mana, it suppresses the Sapo, taking down its buffs, and also losing warded, so you can kill it with some damage instead of, with some hard removal. The Celestial Dragon buff makes it that much better. It's no longer able to be killed by direct damage spells. And the Perfect Grade buff makes this one of the best top-end cards in the game, competing, I would say, with things like Sapo or with Armageddon Angel. Right in line with them. So that just makes the yellow-purple deck that much stronger. And this version that I'm featuring is by Large Nuggets. He is actually one of the innovators of yellow-purple. He's been with this archetype for quite a while, so I would very much trust his opinion on what this deck should be running. And up next, we have a crowd favorite. Everybody in MythGuard loves this deck. It's going to be Orange Purple Peach Control, classic grinder style control deck. You use your smaller minions to control a board with things like Dark Passenger to make sure that they can't really have any threats down. You use your Nine-Tailed Vixen to consistently just recur your Racer and Shadows or your Sword Saints. And then once your graveyard's nice and full, you use your Peach of Life to heal all the way back up and it's just like they never even did any damage. A couple of the changes that make this deck another top tier option for you: the Steam Bun change. Being able to add another Steam Bun to your hand is going to be very key for this deck. It's more bodies in your graveyard, it's more control on the board with smaller drops, and the square pikes, once they stack up on a minion, can make that very threatening. Another change is going to be the Baku Boogeyman, discarding things like your square pikes from the Steam Bun, discarding things like your Racer and Shadow when you have your Nine-Tailed Vixen out to recur that right back into your hand is going to be extremely great. And also your opponent may not have that extra leverage to be able to discard a token like the Parser Recruit or an item like the Pike from the Steam Bun. So that's just going to give you another edge up over your opponent. You know, and this deck is based on building that edge, just that little bit of edge. Just keep building on that and building on that and building on that until it's just too much for your opponent to handle. And then you Peach of Life all the way back to full health, drop a perfect grade, and clear their whole board, and you're back in control. This is going to be a very viable option throughout the ranks in Mythgard. It's a classic Mythgard deck. Everybody loves it. So go ahead and pick it right back up because it's in style again. And here we have another rehash on a classic Mythgard option. Is going to be green-purple Reanimator. I have covered this in the past, but with some buffs, this deck is just going to be another top-tier option for you. The version that I am featuring here is by NKL. He is a top-tier Mythgard deck builder, so he opts for the Zmei Hydra, which is going to be a very strong option to carry you in through that mid-game into your late game, just in case you do happen to miss your Hopeless Necro drop, or if they seal your Hopeless Necro, or if they clear your Boneyard with a Ghoul or something like that. The Zmei Hydra will really carry you in through into your later drops, which you have no shortage of. You're running full suite Short Stag, Iku Turasu, Indric Beast. You have your Celestial Dragon, 2 Lantern Colossus, your perfect grade, your God of Gamers to also help get you over the edge through the mid game. So you have plenty of options. A couple of changes here that I think make this deck a little bit better is going to be the Hotel Barkeep buff. Adding that ramen to your hand so you can flip your disc twice in one turn, while also playing a really well-statted 3/4 to carry you again through that mid-game. So one of the weaknesses with the Necro decks is if you don't get your Necro combo off, it's really hard to come back into the game. But with these changes that NKL has made and that the buff patch has made, it makes that weakness that much smaller, so you don't really have too much trouble if you do miss your Necro drop, or if it somehow gets manipulated to where it's not a viable win condition for you anymore. So along with that, you have the Jinsuk buff, you have the perfect grade buff. I would still say Lantern Colossus is going to be one of the best options to get back from your Hopeless Necro because of that overrun, and you also still get that Immolation Cloak into your hand to either use to clear off their board or discard with your Disc of Circadia. And up next, we have a tricolor deck, 3 colors. It's going to be yellow, purple, splashing a little bit of green, and it is in fact a Fires of Creation deck. So this is probably one of the best options as far as Fires of Creation decks go. If you really want to play one, I would recommend this one heavily. So you are basically hanging on to your early game with Clay Effigies, drawing you cards, Maze of Ietiku, drawing you cards, Racer and Shadow, clearing their early board, along with Matryoshka. You have your Imperative Bell to help you ramp up into your Forgelings, and then you have your Balance to draw some cards. Balance is quite a surprise for me personally. I wasn't expecting this card to be great, but it really only takes the opponent having 3 minions on board to be worth it. Even 2 would be perfectly fine to cast Balance if you don't think that they will be able to get 3 minions on board. And 3 minions on board is it's not as scary as I was expecting it to be. I'm finding myself in a lot of situations where I'm perfectly fine using Balance, and you know, still having the available mana and gems to continue to clear their board afterwards or build my own board up. But a couple of changes that really help this deck specifically is going to be that Balance change, the perfect grade buff as well, so you can Imperative Bell ramp into some big stuff. You can get your Jinsuk down earlier, another big help, and then The Shroud of the Pit basically gives you infinite Racer and Shadow, so that's going to be one recursion option for you along with your Nine-Tailed Vixen. So looking at this deck, it's going to be one of the strongest options for you. You of course have your standard yellow control suite with the Effigies, the Libres. You have Orbital Jamming Satellite for the artifact synergies. You have Zelhua the Builder for more artifact synergies. A 3 mana 4/3 is vanilla stats that also heals your artifacts at the start of each turn, and it gets +1/+1 whenever you create an artifact. And of course, in a Fires of Creation deck, you're going to be running quite a bit of artifacts. The Olama Ring is going to be extremely well positioned with the Racer and Shadows, and with your other drops like Rogue Eidolon, your Sword Saints suddenly become a threat with your Olama Rings out. And then of course, one interaction that I actually discovered a couple of days ago, actually playing a yellow-purple control deck by NKL. The Imperative Bell is able to target opponent's minions. So say you have an Imperative Bell out, you target an opponent's minion with it, you play Misanthropia. That Misanthropia is going to kill the opponent's minion on their turn, triggering your Imperative Bell, drawing you that card, giving you that extra mana, and allowing you to play that card on their turn. So that's a really neat interaction that I wasn't aware of until I was actually watching Toonstar's stream, and I saw him target an enemy minion with the Imperative Bell. So I'll go ahead and link Toonstar's stream down below if you somehow have never seen it. He's one of the biggest MYTHGARD streamers, so if you haven't, I'll link his down below, and keep that interaction in mind when both playing this deck and playing against this deck. And last but not least, I had to throw in one of my favorites. It's going to be Mono Purple Shinobis. This was actually one of my very first videos. It was my personal very first deck. It's the deck that I used to climb to gold in beta season 1. I think this deck is extremely well positioned to actually be pretty viable. I have a lot of changes in mind to make to this deck. It is a aggro / mid-range style deck. You can go pretty quickly, but you also have the tools to grind the game out longer if you need to. So a couple of changes that make this deck a little bit better. The juiced change is really good in this deck, giving the minions a move action in addition to the +1/+1. It's going to help you carry yourself and really control that board and get that extra bit of face damage, move around the blockers, move into blockers with things like Shinobi of Smoke. The Shinobi of Smoke change itself is going to be very key for this deck as well, clearing the enemy blockers, allowing things like Shinobi of Wind, allowing things like Tarragon to smack at their face instead of at the blocker. The Shinobi of Fire change is going to be extremely key to this deck as well. Those Flame Scrolls only costing 1 mana, and they are very easy to stack because the Shinobi of Fire does have Agile, so you can almost always smack their face. And if you can't, go ahead and use your Hotel Barkeep's Powerful Ramen, use your Juice to move your Shinobi of Fire to an open lane and just hit their face and get that extra 3 damage. And then you have your back alley Ronins. This is going to be very good to get off. It's very easy to trigger with your Shinobi of Fire, your Shinobi of Wind, your Shinobi of Smoke. Any Shinobis are going to be able to trigger that back alley Ronin, along with things like your powerful Ramen from the Hotel Barkeep. And then of course you're going to be running Impel. Impel is extremely great with your Shinobis, moving them around the board. And then you have 2 of the Pentacle of Flavors. Pentacle of Flavors under your Shinobi of Fire can essentially close out a lot of your opponent's options, because that Blast 5 is going to pretty much cover almost the entire board. Along with Impel, you're pretty much going to cover the whole board. They can't play any minions with 5 health unless they're warded. So if you get that combo off, you're almost guaranteed win the game. And then you have some later game closers like Tarragon, you have your Celestial Dragon, and you have your Lantern Colossus to help close out those grindier matchups. And then of course you have your God of Gamers. This is essentially a Shinobi of Smoke on steroids. It's just a better statted minion, and then you also get that crown into your hands so that you can continually recur the God of Gamers, or you can recur something like your Tarragon or your Celestial Dragon as well. I like Jin Suk here. Being able to manipulate the opponent's movements is going to be very helpful to get those breach effects off on your Shinobis, to get that extra damage off from your back Alley Ronin or whatever it is that you're trying to do to help close out the game. You have your Racer and Shadow to clear out any smaller blockers, and it's just overall, I think this is a well-positioned deck. There is some tuning to do. I'm still adjusting this deck almost every other game, it seems like, but this is the list I'm currently on. I am currently doing pretty well in the Mithril rank, you know, so you shouldn't have any trouble with this in, say, gold or silver. I think this is going to be a very well-positioned deck. So there you have it. 5 different decks, 5 different purple decks to try post-purple buffs. So, you know, if you want me to make a video on any of them, let me know in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to join the Nephilim GG Discord. I'll link that as well. And we also have launched our brand new website featuring our very first article from Lanka the Sane, and we'll also have more articles weekly. I'm going to try to do my best to get 2 articles out per week from my team onto that website, so keep your eyes peeled. I'll post each article and each video in the Discord, and I'll also post a few scattered around onto Reddit or onto the MYTHGARD Discord itself as well. You know, give me a like if you like the video. Make sure you do subscribe for more MYTHGARD content, and remember to always GG for Matt.